Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is KIAN JABOUR and I am your host this evening as usual. Sorry for the little late start. There's lots of traffic, lots of things going on in Guyana right now, especially cricket. It's Amazon Warriors season and the team has been doing phenomenally. There is nothing I think any Guyanese loves more than to get into the excitement and watch everyone kind of revel and bask in the glory of our Amazon Warriors. Granted, as everyone understands with sports, you can't win everything. I mean, I guess that's a little ironic because we haven't won anything yet. But nonetheless, we are looking good this year, and we're hoping that I feel like this is I feel like this might be the jinx, but I'm hoping this is we year. Nonetheless, my guest here is Mr. Timothy Jonas. As you all know, senior counsel, one of the foremost lawyers in the country, and I am going to start off with him by picking a bone. The first thing that I'm going to say to you is you had an interview recently on GlobeSpan. Wonderful interview, a very interesting exchange. You had Joel Bagwandin and J.K. Lal, two very prominent people when it comes to commentary, political commentary, and then yourself. But what my bone is to pick with you first, and I think we need to clear the air on this, is the first thing you said in that interview is you're not a politician. And I must agree with Joel on this because he very quickly in his first segment stated, I think Mr. Jonas is a politician. So can you give us your take on your stance as a politician or not so much?
And you started off so well. I thought you were talking about cricket. And I was sharing your joy and how well.
I feel like I'm dealing with a bully.
And I was thinking actually about Tahir, the captain, because I knew he was in his 40s, but it turns out the man is 46, I believe.
Wow.
44 or 46. Now, there's a sad thing about getting older. You remember what you could do and how much energy you had and how fast you used to be. And you watch the youngsters playing cricket, and suddenly they've become youngsters, because I'm the generation of Chris Gayle. And there's always a sense of nostalgia. So when I hear this old man captain in the side, I felt an affinity.
Energized, hopefully.
It's a very true saying that the older you get, the better you used to be. Because the stories grow, the stories get better. So I thought we were here to talk about cricket, and then you're going to hit me with this.
Well,
out to left wing, out to left field. Let me answer that question.
Okay.
Politicians identify in our democracy one way or another, and most of them are tainted, most of them are corrupt, most of them are willing to compromise and cut corners on ethics, and most of them, because they're in one field or the other, one tent or the other, are part of Guyana's problem rather than Guyana's solution. So in a democracy, the classic concept of a politician is somebody who is aspiring to lead the country, to the presidency or to the government. Listen, a third party in Guyana is going to wait 100 years. It might happen. It's not impossible, but it might happen for that third party to get into government. But if Guyanese want to be honest, and honesty is the antithesis of politics, if Guyanese want to be honest, Guyanese will recognize that third party needs to be there for the independent parliament. So I will keep saying I'm not a politician because I'm not going to pretend to anybody that a new United Guyana is going to get into the government. What I will say is a new United Guyana will not, as long as I'm there, the day you see me walk away is the day you know that they've decided to join one party or the other. They will not join one party or the other, and therefore they will be in the wilderness with very few friends, but hopefully enough friends for there to be a majority opposition in parliament.
But I do want to make a little correction, if you will. When you say ANUG will never be in government, will never be an executive, ANUG will never be a part of the executive, at least in any time soon. I can also be the first to argue that if AFC had maintained their independence, come 2020, or even more so 2025, I do believe they had a strong chance of winning an election, right? Because we all know the necessity of an independent third party now. But Parliament is the legislative part
Okay,
of the part of the government, no?
No, not technically. And I guess that technicality is the lawyer in me talking.
Okay.
Government is the executive, and
Okay.
Parliament is Parliament. Parliament is the second limb, the second pillar of the Westminster system of democracy, the judiciary being the third.
Okay.
So government approximates to executive. But that's just a technicality. It's a minor thing.
So let's just strike it while it's hot. So ANUG's main goal is to become a third party, thus holding enough seats in Parliament
For a majority opposition.
for a majority
So that
opposition,
Parliament is independent.
or a minority government.
Yes.
Yeah,
So that
okay.
Parliament is truly independent of the executive of the government.
Okay, so like I said, we strike it while it's hot. And what will that do? How does that help Guyana in any way, shape, or form?
That solves so many problems. A lot of people talk about constitutional reform. You hear the expression so often that it's become a cliche. It's meaningless. It's like reading fine print. Nobody does it. You hear it and it passes over your head. Constitutional reform is impossible in Guyana because the party in power will never agree unless there's violence or a total breakdown of society. So how do we achieve a democracy where our leadership is representative of our demographic? The way to do it is to ensure that whichever of the two large camps holds government, the other camp holds parliament. That is how the balance happens. That's why they call it a balance of power. So that parliament passes the laws, the government implements the laws. If parliament is the government, as has been the case in Guyana throughout history, except for the 5 years that AFC had a swing vote and didn't use it, then the same party that makes the laws runs the government and implements the laws. So they make the laws that they like, that help them, that keep them in power, that keep them in money, that keep them doing what they want to do. And they enjoy it. Look, every Land Cruiser you see in Guyana is brought in duty-free. Why is it brought in duty-free? Because duty on a Land Cruiser is so high that nobody can afford it. And therefore, the only people who can bring in Land Cruisers are people who write the laws, and in writing those laws, give themselves exemptions so that they are exempt from paying the duty on the Land Cruiser. And for that reason, when you see a Land Cruiser, and I'm telling you this statistically in Guyana, when you see a Land Cruiser on the road, duty was not paid on it. 99.5% of Land Cruisers in Guyana came into the country duty-free. So the end result of that is that the party in power passed a law to give themselves duty-free concessions so that they could have a luxury vehicle that nobody else could have. So they passed the law and ran the country for their own benefit to benefit from that law. And you have first-class citizens that drive around in heavily tinted Land Cruisers, and you have the rest of us, second-class citizens. It's gotten so bad now in our land of oppression that in the morning when you're driving to work, usually you have to get out of the way because there are two heavily tinted Land Cruisers escorted by police with sirens to make you get out of the way so they can get where they're going.
They have police lights now.
We are accustomed. We are accustomed to our oppression. We don't even see it anymore. But that is an example of the people in power passing laws to benefit themselves at the expense of everybody else. If an opposition parliament was in control, the laws would more fairly reflect the needs of the people and there would be equity in the laws that are passed. That's all it's about.
Simple as that. It's maintaining accountability and transparency.
Yes.
It's having a parliament where the government, the executive, meaning the president and ministers, cannot pass laws that will benefit them.
Right. And I guarantee you, you will not see me in a duty-free Land Cruiser driving around the place, even if I were in Parliament or even if I had managed to get some kind of position in one of the three pillars of the democracy. Because as long as the ordinary Guyanese are taxed to the extent that they are excluded from that kind of privilege, the people who are taxing them also should not enjoy that kind of privilege. That is just common sense.
I am going to say this proudly because I think it is something that needs mention and it should be mentioned as much as possible. I know ANUG themselves have made a decision, the executive has made a decision that during their stint in Parliament, in which they are entitled a duty-free concession, will not be taking it.
Well, I certainly hope not. I've been agitating for that, but again, I'm not going to talk on behalf of ANUG until it happens, but we'll see it happen.
Nonetheless, I'm going to jump straight into something that I think is critical to this conversation here. I'm going to ask the operators to please bring up, I think it would have been the last still that I had sent. It is of the opposition leader and the president on frame, stating that the president, Irfan Ali, maintaining that there are persons already performing their functions of Chancellor and Chief Justice while dodging questions on substantive appointments. Opposition leader Aubrey Norton today said he is convinced that the president has shut the door on confirming Justice Yonit Cummings as Chancellor and Justice Roxanne George as Chief Justice. The two have been acting in the position since 2017, and although the opposition leader has offered his full support to both of their confirmation, the president has not budged on the issue. This is stemming from an interview with the media that the president had last week. I was fortunate enough to catch the interview in its totality, and the media asked him at least 4 times if he planned on confirming the judges, Chief Justice and Chancellor. So my first question to you is, why would it be necessary if, as the president claims, there are already people acting in these positions? Why is it necessary to confirm them into these positions?
All right.
Instead of this acting role they're in.
I didn't see which media house.
News source.
So is that APNU or PPP?
APNU. Well, Gordon Mosley.
Right. So here's the thing. I think after politicians, I have issues with journalists in Guyana. One day, we will have fair reporting and we'll be able to turn on and expect fair reporting on from our various media houses. If that was a PPP media house, they would go back a bit further. Because it's true, they've been acting appointments and these two ladies have acted since 2017. But that's not the whole story by a long shot. And to be fair, you gotta tell the whole story. Ian Chang was acting Chief Justice. Carl Singh was acting Chief Justice. So we're not just going back to 2017 and saying as if it's a new problem to the president, no, why aren't you doing it? We have to acknowledge the reality that for 20 years plus, there have only been acting appointments. I think since Desiree Bernard was Chief Justice, I think she was substantive Chief Justice. That's back in the early 2000s. Since then, the appointments of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice have been acting. They have never been confirmed in their positions. And people need to understand why this is important. We talked about the 3 pillars of democracy. Government, vote them in and you vote them out. Parliament, you vote them in and you vote them out. The pillar that stands alone is the judiciary. And the independence of the judiciary is an absolute. If you do not have an independent judiciary, you have a breakdown of everything. How do you guarantee that the judges are independent? You make sure that the system in place does not allow anybody in government to have right to hire them or fire them. If a judge knows that he can be fired by a minister or by the president or by somebody in government, he's going to give decisions for the minister or the president or for the people in government. That's obvious, because a judge, like anybody else, is a human being. He needs to get his money at the end of the month so he can pay his bills. He wants to advance professionally. He wants to grow socially. He wants the luster of the profession that he has, the VIP status. And if that is threatened because somebody in government got the power to fire him, we have an issue. And therefore we have a Judicial Service Commission And everyone in Guyana has heard about the Judicial Service Commission, that we've taken years to appoint the people to the Judicial Service Commission. At long last, it's been done, which is the body who has the power to appoint judges, but also to discipline judges. The twist with acting appointments is that if you're not confirmed, if you're only appointed to act, you can be removed at pleasure. So technically, an acting Chief Justice or an acting Chancellor can be removed by the President like that. So we're right back to square one, where you gotta wonder, what kind of pressure are these professionals under with the knowledge that they do not have that security of tenure in the positions that they hold? Think about that. It is so serious. And a credit to these two professionals is that they do their job regardless. And I have never had an inkling or a glimmer of a suggestion that they have acted because they were under pressure from a government entity. But on the flip side, and you must think about this as well, there are other judges who will recognize immediately, given the vulnerability of the offices that are held just as acting appointments, that maybe, if those people who hold acting positions are removed because they give adverse decisions, maybe they'll be promoted. And that's equally dangerous. So it is critical for there to be a substantive Chancellor and a substantive Chief Justice, not just because those two professionals will then have the luxury to do their jobs properly without being afraid of the obvious uncertainties which come with an acting appointment, but also because they will be able to exercise their administrative functions of managing the rest of the judiciary. And the rest of the judiciary will not have that, whether they ever exercise it or not, whether they are ever influenced by it or not, it's not relevant. It mustn't be there, that possible influencing factor, to think maybe I can be the next Chief Justice, maybe I can be the next Chancellor, because the people who sitting in those jobs know they're a little shaky. That needs to stop. Now, the other problem that is, to me, even more important than this is that of a complement of 25 judges in Guyana, and even 25 isn't enough to deal with the workload that is given to our judiciary, we got 9. We have 9 beasts of burden who carry the load of the judiciary in this country. And people come to me in my office, in my practice. Why is it taking so long for a case to come up to be heard? Why is the judge taking so long to hand down a decision? I saw some coward writing the other day in the papers criticizing one of the judges for taking more than 6 months to hand down a decision. They have no idea of the pressure these judges are under and how hard they're working. And this is the best group of judges I've ever had the privilege to practice in front of. This generation of judges, they work damn hard. But how can they be expected to live up to meet the needs of the society if it's 9 of them doing the work of 25? Now, the last thing I want to say about this story and my criticism about media houses and PNC media houses and PPP media houses is that this is how it works, and this is the amendment to the Constitution that was agreed back in the early 200s when a breakdown in society and rioting on Regent Street forced the PPP to the table in terms of discussing constitutional reform. It was agreed that the Chancellor and the Chief Justice would not be appointed unless the President and the Leader of the Opposition agreed to the identity of the person being appointed. And since then, there's never been an agreement between the President and the Leader of the Opposition. Do you think that failure to agree is because both of these individuals for the last 20 years have wanted the best for Guyana and have wanted the best professional, the brightest judge to be appointed to those positions? Or do you think that the two politicians who were obligated to agree to make that decision, each of them wanted a lackey, somebody who they were confident would give decisions that were favorable to them, especially in a pinch? The politicians that we have are not concerned about Guyana. The politicians that we have are concerned about party loyalty and about ensuring that their party stays in power, so that they stay in power, so that they can drive their Prados and you can get out of the road.
I'm not going to divulge too much into that because this is an area of your expertise. So I think you kind of covered all the bases, but I'm happy you ended on a certain note there on so that they can drive their Prados on the roads. I'm going to switch gears very rapidly here. All right. And I'm going to throw you because as time goes on, I want to cover as much as we can because we've had a limited time. I'm going to ask our operator to please bring up the newsroom front page ad or cover ad that said 20 died in road accidents in the last 2 weeks. Now, I think this is an issue that is plaguing this country. And I think it has to have a very, very serious discussion between you and I now to understand why this is happening. I think we need to divulge into the root of something that is clearly a systemic problem. All right? How is it that we, of a population of less than 1 million people, 800,000 people, with, let's say, half of the people in this country driving, can have these kind of statistics with 20 people dying in 2 weeks, in 14 days. And this is not a number. Let's just be very clear about this. This is not a number that is recent. This is not a surge. People die on our roads every day, all year, 365 days a week of the year. Now, let's discuss, and I want you to give me your opinion on why something like this is occurring. How can we be losing lives at this rate on our roads?
That's a question that's multifaceted. It got so many things that you have to look at. All right, starting point. How do you identify the problem so that you can reach for the solution? We have seen so often in Guyana that a crisis comes up and our leaders rant and rave and come with some heavy-handed and unsustainable response. That's not going to work. So let's put that in the context of traffic accidents. You get 20 deaths in 2 weeks, some of them in circumstances that are horrendous. And the response of the police, led by Home Affairs Minister and the Acting Commissioner, is to place policemen randomly at various arteries on the roadway to stop traffic. That's all. So, I don't know who on earth believes that more police on the road, just stopping traffic, asking for documents, sending you on your way, making you strip your tint off of your car, is going to have any impact whatsoever on people speeding and driving dangerously. And more than that, I don't know how long that so-called campaign can be sustained before we go back to normal. So what has happened here is you've had 20 deaths, and then you've had the stock response, the response we get every single time, which is you put more people on the road to placate the public. Oh, look, there are more police on the road. Suddenly we're going to drive properly now. And you know full well that in 2 weeks we'll be back to normal. And you also know full well that the hundreds of drivers who are stopped and inconvenienced by these police have absolutely nothing to do with the recklessness and the speeding that is going on. I don't know why it's difficult for the people who make the decisions to use their brain and try to decide for themselves what is responsible for the road carnage. Let me give you some theories. The first is this. As long as the majority of drivers are breaking the rules, the problem is bigger than the authorities. You see, rules are there to set a norm, to set a standard. And that standard must be a standard that everybody acknowledges to be right, acknowledges to be correct, so that ordinary people like you and me, happy to obey and meet that standard. And the people who are breaking the law therefore fall into the minority. If most people, if the laws are either incomprehensible or unfair, so that most people breaking them, then there's no standard, there's no norm, and therefore there's no rules. So you will have people driving up the right side of the road on the embankment road going past Giffland Mall, going towards UG Road and going towards Ogle Airport. You will have people crossing over the yellow line at the roundabout going to Kitty in the morning as part of the rush hour. You will have people ignoring red lights. You will have people driving up on the shoulder of the road because there is no norm, because most of us do not obey the law. And why do most of us disobey the law? Because the law is either incomprehensible or it's unfair. So the first step is to make the law comprehensible and make the law fair. I challenge people to think about this. And I'm talking to the folk in Georgetown. Most of Guyana drives through Georgetown. Georgetown is where the population center is. So I've got to use Georgetown as the example. If you drive north on Blissingen and you come to Camp Ghana, and you are on a very wide road, driving north toward the seawall, and you approach Camp Ghana, there are 3 lanes of roads identified, and it might as well be in Mandarin, because it is totally incomprehensible which lane you are supposed to go in to go straight. And the left turn lane is the widest lane. It should be the narrowest lane. And the left turn lane is in line with the lane that goes straight, as if you should be going straight across the road.
Right.
So there is total chaos at that junction every single rush hour.
Right.
Why is there chaos? Because everybody breaking the law. And why are they breaking the law? Because it's gibberish in terms of road direction and traffic direction. Make the laws comprehensible.
Just before we go on, another good example of this, and I know it'll resonate a lot with Guyanese, is to hammer home your point, is the roundabout with the Harpy Eagle in the middle that goes onto the back road. I know most Guyanese driving that road every day understand that roundabout is the most poorly designed piece of road in this country, and everyone that drives it knows that. So when you speak about incomprehensible, I think that is something so critical for people to understand, that there are so many flaws in our actual structure of our road that it's the first issue. And I can go on to about the roads being not lit properly, about no proper signage, etc., etc. So incomprehensible is obviously the first point, but go on, please.
The second point deals with speed limits. Now, let me tell you straight, I'm in the majority that breaks the law, because we have some ridiculous speed limits around the place. And the police are well aware how ridiculous the speed limits are, because they know where everybody's breaking them. Home stretch. The speed limit on home stretch, which is a wide, clear, open road with no pedestrians because there's no stop-off points, is 50 kilometers or 30 miles an hour. I have not seen a vehicle that drives 50 kilometers on home stretch, and therefore there is no norm. If the speed limit was reasonable, if it was 80 kilometers an hour, most people would be happy to obey that. And therefore the few reckless souls who are driving in excess of 80 would be in the minority, and it would be easier to police them and to prevent breakdown in the law. If you go up the East Coast past Success, there's a 4-lane highway where the speed limit in some places is 50 kilometers an hour. Nobody will obey that. So if you have a situation where the majority of people in Guyana break the law, there is no norm, there is no standard to aspire to. So set rules, make the laws comprehensible, put markings on the road that are sensible and people are happy to obey, and then set speed limits so that a standard is established. Because what will happen there is that 90% of the population will obey the laws, just like 90% wear seatbelt because it's sensible.
Yeah.
And the 10% are then easier to deal with. That's the first step. The second step is fines and penalties. In fact, before I go to fines and penalties, all right, fines and penalties. Fines and penalties should be sufficient that it hurts. $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 is not enough. We are at a stage where we need to be looking at 100,000, 75,000, 100,000. And it needs to be on a scale that if you're speeding at 90 kilometers in an 80 kilometer section, you get a small fine, but it increases incrementally. So that if you get caught at 120, you pay a whopping fine because you're driving very dangerously. That's the other thing. The third thing is the police need to set an example. Kia and I was driving to work this morning, and inevitably I was repressing my own frustration, going down Kitty, heading to the famous roundabout, aware of the vehicles that speed past on the left to cross the double yellow line to bore through, to get through to the roundabout first, knowing that I'm not going to let anybody bore through on my left because I don't look that way, I keep straight. And to my astonishment, this morning at 8:10, going to work, the car that I was not permitting to pass on my left, crossing the double yellow line, blew his horn. Police car PXX 5113. I could not believe it. If the police
telling you to break the law?
No, he's breaking the double
he's
line,
breaking the law.
Coming in to... If the police feel that it is okay if they're in a hurry to turn on their sirens to get you out of the way, to run a red light because they don't want to wait, if they think that that is okay, then they set the standard for everybody else. There has to be a standard that applies to everybody. I would like to suggest that anytime a siren is used by an ambulance, by a policeman, by a fire truck, or by a Prado, there needs to be a system that the person who uses the siren, the driver, is obligated to report to his superiors that at this location, at this time, I use the siren for this reason. So that anytime I'm stopped or I have to pull over to the side of the road and I see a police vehicle or an ambulance or any other vehicle going past, I can find out why. And that would reduce the abuse that we see all over the place. So there's a reason people are dying. There's a reason people are driving recklessly. And a big part of it, is that the laws are incomprehensible, the laws are unfair, and the people who should be enforcing the laws are equally culpable of breaking the laws.
I'm gonna touch on one more area here that I don't think that you paid enough attention to, because I do believe that your PXX car will be an example of it. But I believe corruption is something that needs to be spoken about when it comes to the road users breaking the laws. And as a road user myself, what I have seen happen in Guyana, and this is speeding or driving up the shoulder of the road or breaking a traffic light or drinking and driving for that matter, what you've quickly come to realize is there is an absolute and complete breakdown of any sort of repercussions to these actions. Anybody with a $5,000 or $10,000 knows that if I do these things, break these laws, and I get caught, I have no problems to deal with. Not to mention, we deal with a society now that everybody knows somebody. By the time the policeman picks you up and carries you to the police station, you don't make a phone call to your uncle who's a minister or your friend who got a link at the police station and that's the end of it. Right? Same couple $1,000s pass and you ain't got to worry about nothing. And I'd like to find and show the connection of corruption to the deaths on the road. Because I personally, as a road user, see a direct line, a correlation, a complete correlation to people paying bribes to police, the police accepting the bribes, and then going and killing people on the road.
Why do police accept bribes, and why do people feel that they generally can pay a bribe with impunity? Why?
Because their boss doing it.
No. The reason is that we don't pay our police enough. And if you pay a man $80,000 or $100,000, and he knows that he could make that much money in 1 week, 2 hours a day, standing up at home stretch, stopping traffic that's speeding, then there is no way you can keep that man honest. We are not paying our police enough.
No, I get
therefore, we don't give them the luxury to do the right thing. You cannot live on $100,000.
I challenge you. I agree. You're 100% right. We can get the cost of living in a second, but I'm going to challenge you on this. Why I'm challenging you on that is that is not why, in my opinion, that why police are taking bribes. You, no matter how much money you pay them, get them $500,000, get them $1 million a month. At the end of the day, if they know, again, that there are no repercussions to them collecting more money, to collecting a bribe, they're going to just continue to do it.
And Kian, I think this is where our philosophies are different. And this is where I have a criticism of Guyanese philosophy.
Good. Yeah.
If you pay someone properly, you give them self-respect.
Okay.
You encourage people, you attract people who already have self-respect to the job. You attract people of the kind of caliber, the kind of quality, who want to advance themselves, who want to go through university, who want to do better, who look after their children, who pay their mortgage, who pay their debts.
Respect the laws.
Who respect the laws and respect themselves. You attract a better caliber of person. And as soon as you do that, that caliber of person has the power suddenly to be proud of his job, and to be proud of what he's doing in his job, and to be proud of what he's accomplishing in his job. And if he has that luxury, when he stops you because you are speeding, he's not going to be happy if he's already earning the kind of money, because he should be earning it, that allows him to look after his family and pay his mortgage and go on a holiday every now and then. He's not going to be too comfortable about you offering him $5,000. And more than that, he's going to be more worried about losing his job. And more than that, he doesn't need your $5,000. And more than that, he is already of the quality and caliber, because you attract better people because you're paying them well, that he will be insulted and you will get 2 charges, one for speeding and one for trying to bribe a police officer.
Okay. On that note, you were implying that anybody that's paid properly in Guyana and continuously has a decent salary isn't corrupt. Because if you're saying that, now you're trying to tell me that there ain't got no ministers in this country taking bribes.
I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that if you do not give somebody enough to look after his family, he will steal, and I will not criticize him for it. Because if you don't give me enough, I will steal.
But what about the government officials that are being given enough and still being corrupt?
You've changed the subject.
Well, I don't.
We're trying to give people the opportunity and the dignity and the self-respect to do their jobs and to feel that they have a vocation and they're contributing to the society and they are doing good. When you go to Barbados, you don't try and bribe Asian police.
Agreed.
You don't try and bribe Asian customs officers, because they are well paid, they are qualified, they've been to school, they know what they're about, and they are proud of their uniform.
Right.
That is so critical. If you go to Trinidad, Trinidad is not as well off as Barbados, but the Trini police are proud of their uniform. You do not mess with them. And you know something? You are happy to see them on the road. I couldn't believe the last time I went to Trinidad, and taxi driver taking me going, and I saw a Trinidad patrol car parked with the radar gun. And I asked the taxi driver about it, and his response, without any nudging from me, was that it's really good to see them out there, because there's been some crime in the area and he's seen some people speeding and driving carelessly, and he's very happy to see police out there. Let me ask you if you can find a Guyanese driver who sees police ahead and says, "Oh, I'm so glad to see these police here."
Yeah.
It's a different approach.
Agreed.
Because those folk are proud of their uniform and are paid enough that they have that self-respect and they have that.
And trained well and can take care of their families and respect for their job. Absolutely.
Yes. You have to pay our police more.
I'm going to agree with you, because I do think that it is multi-pronged, and I will still hold to, again, you will always have issues, in my opinion, and you're right, you will attract a better caliber of police if you pay them better and train them better and give them better benefits and respect them. But I still will hold to my point in saying that unless there are repercussions to their actions, unless corruption from the top down is eradicated, unless accountability is had throughout, you're not going to expect it from the bottom.
You know, the same thing that we talk about with why road users don't obey the laws of the road, because the laws are unfair and therefore the majority don't obey. That principle applies throughout. So if you're paying a policeman $80,000 or $100,000, you're already unfair. And the majority of policemen will not be able, they cannot do their job properly, have the dignity to look after their families. So the majority are already against you. How can you control deviance? But if you give them that luxury and you pay them and you have that caliber, the people who will be corrupt will suddenly be in the minority, because the majority will be content with their lot. The same principle applies. You give people the opportunity to do the right thing. You give them the dignity to feel that they are accomplishing good in their vocation, and they feel they feel satisfied with their lot.
Good.
And suddenly you will find the majority are happily doing their job, and the minority are the ones you can then deal with.
You're right. I can see to that point that if people are paid better and taken care of more, they will be less likely to break the law and contribute more positively to society.
I strongly
I'll give you
believe that if somebody is content, and again, the ancient philosopher said it, you give a man a house, have him happy with his wife and his family, he's not going to go out and loot and pillage and murder, because when people looting and pillaging and murder, he'll be home protecting his wife and his house.
Absolutely.
He has something of value.
Absolutely. Now, what a fantastic segue. I'm going to ask my operator to please bring up something that we're going to have a very interesting discussion on. This is a chart that I personally did myself. It took me quite some time. It's actually... Thank you for predicting what I was going to ask for. It is something that, as a matter of fact, we had discussed since the first or second show of Apolitically Incorrect. So it's something that we've been working on for over a year, gathering information. And my team and I, it took a long time for us to put these figures together. And the trickiest part has obviously been the fact that it's evolving every single day. All right. So this here is a breakdown of the basic expenses at its most basic level of an average person's monthly expenses living in Guyana. All right. Different parts of Guyana will obviously have different costs. So this cannot be accurate throughout Guyana. What we've done is taken an average throughout. All the people that we've asked, and I think it's extremely difficult for us to look at these numbers and say, no, this should be lower.
I think the figures are very realistic looking at it from here.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you immediately, so this is a single parent with one dependent, I assume a child.
Yes, that's what I mean.
And you are criticizing the police for taking bribes?
No. Okay, good start. So what I just want everyone to do for 2 seconds.
I want to formally announce that they now have my sympathy.
No, yes, agree. So you might actually start bribing them. Don't do that, please. But nonetheless.
We have just identified the core of the problem in Guyana.
Absolutely.
So you go in any public service area, the deeds registry, NIS, any of the ministries, and their starting salary, their starting income, nurses, police, teachers, rounds off less than $100,000. So they can't have children because you telling me one parent with one dependent is twice that.
Yes.
They have no prospect of advancement, so they gotta stay single. They can't have children, and they will still starve. We have a major problem. And the other day, I understand that it was announced that they have to look at the fiscal effects of raising the minimum wage to what was it? Again, less than 100, I think, maybe about 100.
Well, it's at 60 now, so let's assume 100.
How shameful can we get? Now, a Prado uses about $30,000 gas every month. I know I spend about that for my vehicle, and I don't do much driving. So we are paying for what one minister or one VIP in his entourage of two or three vehicles spends in gasoline alone. And we want to pay that to a person and tell them they must do their job honestly, go to work every day, work 9 to 5, and be content. And we drive past them in our 2 or 3 vehicle lineup, escorted, and what we pay for gas is what we're giving them for the month. And we talk about fiscal responsibility. Guyanese are really accustomed to their oppression.
We looked at those numbers, and I will say that, as you mentioned, it was in the news recently that the president brought up, I think this week, that he will be mulling the minimum wage. There is another conversation I think that should be had here, which is coming from, as a private businessman myself, and yourself as well with your private practice, nobody is paying minimum wage at this moment, at least not the majority of businesses in the country. We know we have a labor shortage, so we know that of everything, to be honest with you, is driving up salaries, as it's becoming more competitive to attract good employees.
Well, I think we got to be careful in painting that with a broad brush. You see, our education system, everywhere you turn, we need work. Our education system has failed so that real literacy rates in Guyana are actually low. There is a high rate of functional illiteracy in Guyana. And there's a lot of children. There are a lot of children who are going through primary school and dropping out and cannot read, cannot write. Now, those children can't go and get employment in any office. So we have a large core of unemployed, young unemployed, middle-aged young employed, who you got to say are almost unemployable unless they can find a place where manual labor is needed, or they can learn a trade, maybe driving machinery or that kind of thing. But there's only so much scope for that. So when you say that there's a shortage, there isn't a shortage of labor so much as a shortage of educated labor.
Okay.
And I think that's where we have to recognize that the need is, and look at our education system and see how we can repair that and tailor our education needs to meet the needs of the employment of the commercial entity.
I'm going to give you a statement that struck me recently that I noticed on social media. And it was somebody that was drawing a comparison, and this was two very interesting terms, between economic growth and economic development. And I found that to be such a fascinating concept that I think a lot of us need to take 2 seconds and think about. We're watching fastest growing economy in the world. We're watching GDP skyrocket and triple. We're watching our budget, our national budget, double in less than a year kind of story. And what I think it was a very interesting concept was the person discussing how that does not translate to the Guyanese developing as citizens, as people, and growing and becoming contributing members of society. Now, I looked at this as a very interesting concept because I always make a comparison to, again, another conversation that I had of the infrastructure development, which the government is throwing up on Newsroom and Chronicle and DPI and NCN every single day, and all their social media platforms claiming, look how much the country is growing. But then everyone not discussing how we have so quickly and rapidly began to deteriorate as a society. We've been watching the schools, the fights in schools. We've been watching deaths on the roads. We've been watching substance abuse. We've been watching so many of these things, crime, murder, armed robberies. We've been watching so many of these things. Again, you want to talk about spiking. We were surging on an equal rate with the amount of roads that the government building. So my question is, what is your interpretation of economic growth versus economic development?
I always try to run away from labels because labels obscure the truth sometimes. And I think maybe we need to just get at what you're trying to say should be important and what is being focused on. When the politicians try to show how much good they're doing, they point to roads being built and hospitals being built and bridges being built, and all of those are good things. But all of those depend on contracts being awarded, and the award of contracts is, as we all know, subject to corruption and kickbacks and that kind of graft. So that's all economic growth. And the development of infrastructure is important, but we also need the development of our people. And I don't think we're getting enough of that. And in fact, I think that we are so far behind in the development of our people that we are going to have a very tough time catching up. Now, for us to have a good education in schools is the same thing as having good policing in our societies. You got to pay your teachers. So when you look at that chart where you need $200,000 a month just for the bare minimum, if you're not starting your teacher off at that salary, you're not getting a good teacher. I guarantee you. You're not getting a teacher who's committed to his or her children, who's committed to doing a good job, who is excited about his vocation and challenged by it and feels gratified when he has successes in terms of teaching his children and seeing their learning curve. You know, if we can get past that, if we can pay our teachers properly, we've started. Mm-hmm. And the same applies for the nurses, the same applies for the police. And that's the starting point. Because those people, now that they are comfortable in their skins and know that they are contributing to society and comfortable with what they're getting in return, they will nurture their children. Mm-hmm. And they will teach their children the norms and equip them to be in society and to function in society. And you won't see that kind of violence in the schools because they will be controlling their schools better. They will have a better quality, a better caliber of teacher, and you will immediately see improvements. So it's all circular. You got to pay them so you get better people, and they do their job better so you get the rewards.
Yeah. I just like to mention as well, just so we always remember, PAYE still exists, all right? And that takes out 30% of their salaries. And I believe that starting salary needs to be $260,000 if they're going to continue with this PAYE scheme that nobody seems to be benefiting from. Nonetheless, I do want to ask you a question, though. You had very quickly touched on something that I skimmed over. I actually stopped you from speaking on it, is the economic impact of raising people's salaries. Because I know you had some statements to make on that. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, I've heard people say that you will have inflation if salaries are raised. I don't think that's the truth. At least it shouldn't be the central focus. If someone's now earning $100,000 a month, what you find is that when they go to the market, they don't ask for a pound of meat. They ask for $1,000 worth of meat. And therefore, the portion that they are buying gets smaller and smaller, and they stretch it further and further. And their lifestyle and their life expectations of quality of life diminish as they go along. And that's what we're seeing.
That's oppression.
So they're getting less and less for their dollar. Mm-hmm. And if you put more money in their hands, they will be able to spend more. I'm not convinced that it will translate to the farmer charging more for his produce, or the person who's transporting the produce to the market charging more for that, or the vendor in the market charging more. I'm not sure it will translate to that.
I do want to make a point on that farmer charging more. You know, the market, whether Stabrook or Kitty or Bordeaux, you know, just to speak about Georgetown or Monrepo for that matter, or anywhere else, they are essentially a small free economy, kind of free.
It's the only free economy that remains in Guyana.
Right.
It's a wonderful balance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I find interesting about that is if you walk into the market right now, you're going to pay $1,300 for a pound of tomatoes. All right? It's something that has gone up within the last week, just so you know. You're going to pay $1,300 for a pound of tomatoes, not from one vendor, not from two vendors, from every single vendor. And what you have to understand with that concept, I know you know where I'm going with this, is because of their free economy environment that they're living in there, it is, if they had the option of charging less, then understand that they are all competing against each other, meaning they're all price competitive. They will bring their costs down, their price down as low as possible because they want to be the first to sell all the tomatoes.
Well, careful. The market is, when I say the market, I don't mean the stock market. I mean the literal market.
Right.
Is an interesting place. Mm-hmm. The farmer farms, and the farmer's economy is peculiar. I've had the privilege of dealing with farmers and tried my own hand at farming, failed hopelessly. So, but it gave me an insight into how they operate. If you see your neighbor is growing pumpkin or Belanger or Baji or anything, and it's looking good, you want to grow the same thing because there's a kind of competitiveness. You want your produce to look better than your neighbor's produce. It doesn't occur to you that if both you grow in the same thing, the price is going to go down.
Right.
The vulnerability of the farmer is that his produce is perishable. He can't sit in it for 2 weeks. He got to get rid of it. And the people who make the biggest money are the people who own trucks and go into those rural areas far away that few of us ever get to and buy from the farmer. They buy dirt cheap. because they can sit down and they can wait until that farmer is desperate for money and willing to short sell. They then reach the market, and they usually will have prearranged agreements with folk in the market that they sell to them. So the people in the market have their difficulty too, because their goods are perishable. The same tomatoes you're talking about, if it sits there for 4 days, it's bad. It's then cannot be sold. So they got to keep it moving. But they also will coordinate with each other to make sure that the prices are kind of balanced, and therefore there's not a system where somebody coming to me because I'm selling cheaper than everyone else. That will create resentment among your neighbors. So it's not exactly free market, but it is subject to the rigors of a perishable crop and competition, and also trying to understand what the market can endure and what people are willing to pay, so that my produce gets moved in a space of time before it goes bad. It's a wonderful balance that goes on there, but it's not all friendship and generosity. It's hard edge and hardcore and hard bitten.
Yeah, but just to understand as well, these prices, for example, your example is your $1,200 or $1,300 a pound of tomatoes. Every market you're going to has the same price. And I don't think Border coordinate with Stabroek.
No, but next week it might be 600 because somewhere tomatoes are out of crop, because somewhere a farmer saw his neighbor growing Belange instead of tomatoes, and he decided he was growing Bora and Belanges like his neighbor. But you will find in a week the price might go down, and there'll be a glut on the market of tomatoes. Tomatoes is an interesting example because it has such a short shelf life, and it can be grown almost anywhere. So you do see fluctuations in that particular crop.
Right. Absolutely. On this note, we are going to have to draw to a close. I know you and I, we spoke before, and we have so many other areas. I've been off for 2 weeks, so we haven't had a chance to cover as much as we are, and it's been backing up on us. Nonetheless, we will be back next week, and we have some very interesting conversations to have with regards to procurement commission and contracts awarded and the system that's being put in place, and more importantly, what a lot of the contractors and businessmen are dealing with when it comes to business with the government. I think that's going to be a large conversation, which is going to take up most of our show. So I will invite you back here either next week or week, you providing your schedule. On that note, everyone, I'd like to thank you for joining us again on this beautiful Friday evening here. We know we have a long week of cricket. I started with cricket. I will end with cricket. The Amazon Warriors is we own. And we play tomorrow. We play Trinidad. I know it's sold out. I'm going to ask everyone. I'm going to plead with everyone in Guyana. It's just a game. I know you have lots and lots of passion. We all love them just as much as each other. Trinidad is our neighbor and our biggest trade partner. And we're going to ask everyone to please be a little respectful. Guys, we are going to have a good time, win or lose. Just to give you another little side note, I promise you, no matter what happens in this game, more than likely we'll play them again. All right. So this game is not that big of a deal. All right. Nonetheless, we want to win. We're backing Warriors all the way. Let's have some good, clean fun out there. The stadium looks beautiful, packed every night. And nonetheless, we want you all to be very safe on the roadways, guys. We know it's a very vibrant time in and around Georgetown and Guyana, for that matter. Lots of people traveling from Berbice and Essequibo coming to Georgetown and, having a good time. But you need to be safe. Guys, we've been seeing what's been happening on the road. So everyone, on a much more serious note, please be careful. Make sure you have a designated driver. And all in all, just respect each other. All right. On that note, thank you again for joining us. We'll be back here next Friday on Apolitically Incorrect. Have a good evening.